The Long Road to True Happiness by WierdRandomTina. Chapter 18, Milestone. Monday was a calm, partly cloudy day, ideal for a walk while collecting all kinds of supplies, including branches, construction materials, and decorative items for Poppy's various collections. But the grey troll couldn't help but notice the princess wasn't herself today. Noticeably quieter, with minimal chit-chat, and no singing at all. Her smiles and enthusiasm were half-forced, as if she wanted to be cheerful, but had little emotional energy to do so. Several times he caught her staring at nothing. For the whole afternoon she was distracted, never fully focusing on what she was doing. Which resulted in Branch growing distracted too. So much so, at one point, he picked the wrong type of vines, an easily recognizable vine that he had collected hundreds of times. It wasn't like Poppy to avoid speaking up. Perhaps she assumes I don't care to hear about it. He may not be fond of discussing his own problems, but that didn't mean she couldn't confide in him about hers. If she simply wanted to let off steam, he would listen in respect for silence. If she wanted advice, he would offer his honest opinion. However, if she was hoping for words of encouragement and compassion, Branch was not the troll for the job. So instead, he decided to try to lift Poppy's spirits with an indirect approach. While he was plucking bulbs out of the ground, he kept a discreet eye on her, waiting until he was sure she was watching him. Then, with the next bulb, he made an exaggerated struggle. When he finally freed it, he stumbled backward and let himself flop ungracefully onto the ground. Branch's heart soared as Poppy finally laughed, teasing him about being clumsier than her and losing a fight to a bulb. She reached out with her pink hands to pull him to his feet, then helped him collect other bulbs he had dropped when he fell. But less than a minute afterward, her duller state returned, causing Branch's heart to sink back down into the ground. That was the only beating around the bush way he could think of cheering her up. And it had failed. Okay, so there was only one option left. He had to let her know that he does care about how she's feeling, regardless of how indifferent he always acts. After psyching himself out for what felt like hours, Branch still spoke, hesitantly.
You know, Poppy, you always say how I can talk to you if something's wrong. Well, the same goes for you.
It took all of his courage to say that little bit, so he was hoping that he wouldn't have to elaborate. Thankfully, the look in Poppy's eyes showed that she understood his vague message. After a few seconds of pondering over her thoughts, she confessed, "Well, the thing is, I made a really bad mistake in my royal duties this morning. Like, really bad." For the next 10 minutes, the distraught princess described the entire situation, from her choice to disobey her own father / the king, to breaking an important 1,000-year-old tradition, to telling a fib to try and fix her dumb mistake, but ending up making it even worse, to upsetting half the village over her foolish actions. Branch kept his eyes on Poppy the entire time, even when she looked away and or paced around as she explained. She asked for his input a few times, and he offered her practical and straightforward answers, telling her both what she did right and what she did wrong. Some of the comments were truthful, to the point of being a tad hurtful, but his constructive criticism was extremely welcomed. Most trolls automatically tell her she's doing a great job regardless of the situation. Hell, she could destroy the entire forest and they'd still find a way to praise their beloved princess. Whereas Branch would never sugarcoat anything. He'd add in all the salt and spices and speak his mind. Sometimes that brusqueness could come off as mean, but in this case, it was refreshingly honest. Something she really needed to hear to help her improve for next time. "Thank you, Branch," Poppy said thoughtfully once the conversation came to an end. "I really needed to hear that." But as she resumed her pebble collecting, Branch noticed she was still not entirely back to normal. Talking about her problems and receiving his feedback had helped, for sure, but it wasn't quite enough. Branch's heart started to beat a little faster. There was one final thing he could do that would complete the happiness equation with 100% certainty. And he longed to do it. But he'd never shown any interest in it. The complete opposite, in fact, emphasizing he didn't want any for any reason, rejecting or ignoring every one of Poppy's attempts. And now he was supposed to leap right out and offer her one? He could never be so forward about something like that.
But why can't I be? There's no fear of her rejecting me, and no worry of making her uncomfortable, because affection is as essential to Poppy as food and water. She's the one who's been trying to get me to be more affectionate. She'd be thrilled that I'm willing to be close to her, and I'd be thrilled to let her be close to me. So what's my problem? Why is the mere idea so flipping nerve-wracking?
Since their visits began, Poppy's light purple bracelet had flowered dozens of times. She used to struggle to keep her arms to herself, but gradually she adjusted and disregarded the little ping. Today, however, when the soft alarm sounded, Branch peered over at her. He caught her give it a sad glance before lightly putting her hand over it to shut it off. Every inch of his body ached with sympathy.
She doesn't just want one. She needs one.
And he had just been given the most appropriate and perfect opportunity.
I can't throw this one away.
Despite the lump in his throat, his trembling knees, and the feeling like he was going to have a heart attack, Branch somehow managed to say,
"You can hug me, if it would make you feel better."
It took Poppy a noticeable moment to figure out if she had heard him correctly. Her fuchsia eyes stared up at him, wide with hope. At last, her familiar, wonderful smile returned to her pretty, pink, freckled face. I can? For real?"
Oh, this is really happening?
Branch tried to keep a blank face, but from the feel of his mouth, it was more like a dorky, crooked grin.
Just this once.
Poppy's smile widened until it took up the entire bottom half of her face. Her fist raised up to her chin in delight. Yep, Branch was definitely experiencing a heart attack. She scampered toward him with wide open arms, and within less than half a second, he was engulfed by her embrace. Well, it was more like a death grip. He was pretty sure she was going to break his shoulders. But, truthfully, it would have been a desirable way to go. Poppy did loosen up after a few seconds, but only so she could snuggle in properly, showing no signs of letting go any time soon. So Branch gingerly let one hand rest across her back. Her heart thumped at his light touch, and she resumed squeezing him comfortably tighter, pressing her cheek against his. At their extended closeness, his other hand involuntarily moved up and around her. Poppy couldn't believe Branch's arms were around her. Very loosely, but still. She felt like she was floating on a cloud. She had to hold her breath to stop from squealing. "I'm hugging Branch, and he's hugging me back!" Since there was no telling when she'd have this opportunity to be this close to him again, she took in every detail. His wider than average firm shoulders, his fuzzy leaf vest tickling her chin, his surprisingly soft face, his relaxing light scent of conifer trees. Branch closed his eyes, unaware of anything except Poppy's warmth and softness, and her gentle scent surrounding him, the distinct sweet fragrance of fresh strawberries. Being this unusually close to her, he also caught a faint but lovely smell of flowers. But before he could distinguish what kind, she'd pulled away, a giant smile still occupying her face. "Yay! Our first real hug!" She could hardly keep her little pink feet still. Branch rolled his eyes, trying to act unmoved, but internally being hair over heels. He didn't have much, if any, really, experience with hugs. But there was one thing about them he knew for sure. he could easily adjust to receiving them from a particular pink and magenta troll. That minor hug was more than enough to revive Poppy's sunniness. She was bouncing around like a bunny as she told him that he just made her day. Branch knew the princess tended to overuse that phrase, but perhaps this time he sort of did, and that made his heart flutter and skin tingle in the most pleasant way. Later that evening, Branch stopped into a little fabric store that he often visited, on the perimeter of the village. On his way to it, most trolls paid no mind to him, or offered him their usual half-hearted hellos or fake cheery greetings. Then he heard a silly but familiar voice call his name. It was Cooper, sitting on a nearby mushroom, accompanied by Guy Diamond and DJ Suki, who greeted him as well. Branch gave them a brief wave before continuing on his way. Unseen to him, the three trolls' jaws dropped open at his friendly response. Whenever anyone tried to acknowledge the grey troll, he would either ignore them, scowl at him, or tell them to leave him alone.
Did you guys just see that?
Suki asked in awe, her rose eyes bulging.
I think Branch just waved at us. Genuinely.
Guy replied in the same tone.
And all this time I didn't think he knew how to wave.
Copper added.
Poppy must have taught him how.
In a way, the long-necked, forward-legged troll was right. On his way out of the village, Branch then heard another voice. The voice of an angel. Branch! Hey, Branch, wait up! He turned to see Poppy rushing towards him, though he saw she was moving in slow motion. I was going to stop by your bunker, but since you're here, I can give you your present now. She slowed to a halt in front of him as she ended her sentence. Branch raised an eyebrow.
Present?
Yeah, I made it for you. She suddenly looked a bit uneasy. I hope you like it. It's kind of colourful, but there's not a speck of glitter, and no sound effects or anything, so... She reached into her hair and pulled out a small scrapbook. Branch held out his hands to receive it. It was half green with a brown border that resembled twigs, half pink with a blue flowered border. A little felt Branch and a little felt Poppy were on the cover, holding hands. But Branch was on the pink and blue flowered side, and Poppy was on the green and brown side. Above them was titled, A Growing Friendship, and underneath them, in some smaller text, said, Part 1. After a few seconds of scrutinizing, Branch glanced up at Poppy to see her staring anxiously at him, looking almost scared. For a second he was confused. Then it hit him. Every special handcrafted item she's ever given him, he's always rejected, telling her she's wasting her time and her artwork is ridiculous, sometimes going as far as to literally toss them aside, or telling her the fancy papers will make a great fire starter. And this wasn't just a card. It was an entire book. Swiftly, Branch spoke.
Yes, I do like it. I really do. Thank you. I'll read it when I get home.
At Poppy's brightening face, he smirked and added,
Hopefully a little colour won't kill me.
She laughed. Well, if it does, I will take full responsibility.
Oh, that cute little sound she makes when she laughs. I could never tire of hearing it.
Back in the bunker, Branch scrutinized the cover. Even though Poppy was a highly experienced crafter, she clearly spent a lot of time and effort on this. It was intricate and well made, and the fact she had switched their distinctive backgrounds really stood out to him. There was no way that was accidental.
It must represent how we've learnt to get along despite our opposite personalities, and how we've experienced each other's distinctly different lifestyles. Creative and thoughtful.
Branch delicately opened the colourful book, taking his time with each page. The first illustrated the living area in his bunker, his couch, bookshelves, tables, with Poppy looking excited and Branch looking unimpressed.
Our visits sure have changed since then.
Folding that scene upwards revealed another underneath. They were outside going for a walk. then collecting berries, twigs, firewood, sap and herbs. Then with empty containers and all of these items floating around them. All the while, Poppy wore a happy face while Branches was neutral. On the second page, she was crafting alone on the couch. There were 2 pull tabs at the side. The first brought out Branch sitting beside her and reading. The second replaced Poppy with a smiling version looking at him.
To think that last month I was afraid to even sit near her, and now this afternoon I offered her a hug.
He let the wonderful memory of their arms around each other drift through his mind for a few seconds. The opposite page showed them contentedly talking about garden pests. White speech bubbles with images of damaged flowers, the pesky green and yellow beetles, and the chemicals and traps to remove them. Then, under that, portrayed in the absolute gentlest way possible, was their conflict, represented by a grumpy-looking Branch and a sad Poppy heading for the elevator. He was surprised she included this scene at all. The happy-go-lucky princess tended to overlook the bad and emphasize only the good. He also felt a stab of fresh guilt for getting mad at her over something so stupid. She hadn't done anything wrong. It hadn't been her fault. It was Branch being jealous and selfish and temperamental. She may have forgiven him for it, but that didn't mean he'd ever forget it. Next, Poppy had featured the apology, the greeting, shyly waving Poppy, a nervous Branch, the walk, looking away and looking nervous, and the time by the river, looking at each other with little smiles, her holding a cupcake and him holding a tart, while pop-up music notes floated around Poppy to indicate her singing. For the next scene, they were lying down on a fuzzy green patch of felt in the middle of a solid blue background. All around them there were multiple pull tabs to make varying cloud shapes appear out of the blue. Poppy's one arm had the ability to adjust to different positions, to make it look like she was pointing to different clouds. The following page was their first puzzle day, one big scene of an unfinished dark blue puzzle, with 2 pink hands and 2 grey hands hovering over it, each holding a puzzle piece. Underneath the entire scene, 3 other scenes could be pulled out with tabs. From the top was a grey hand giving a glass of water to a pink hand with a friendly yellow background. From the outer side revealed a scene number 2, the grey hand grabbing the pink one as it tried to leave, with an exclamation mark. Branch blushed at the memory. He'd really hoped she had forgotten that, but no, of course she didn't. The final scene, pulled out from underneath the others, was similar to the first, / top one, except the puzzle was dark green, and the background was a brighter brown, and a little yellow trophy was beside the grey hands. After that, there was a brown gift box between a happy Poppy and a sad Branch. The little flat square flipped open to let several pop-ups bounce out. A muffin, a mini tart, a cookie, and a smiley heart hugging another smiley heart. Underneath, they worked on a colourful puzzle. The little felt images had their ears clearly overlapping, whereas in every other previous scene, the figures were clearly separate. Apparently the giddy princess was much more observant than he realised. How many other embarrassing fumbles did she notice? Next was the high five. Poppy's raised hand was stationary, while Branch's was attached to a tab that allowed it to be moved and contact hers. Beside that was him holding a mug, with her holding a matching mug with a pull tab to raise the mug to her mouth and make little smiley faces appear. Turning the page, he was greeted with a full pop-up image page of a dark scribbled-on squares to represent his paintings, as well as paintbrushes and cans floating around. In the centre was a pink Poppy face, with a round open mouth of astonishment. The following 2 pages consisted of a picture of each board game played, and the winner represented by a pink trophy with a blue flowered headband, or a grey trophy with brown and green patches. Connect 4 cupcakes, B. Vines and ladders, P. Babble, B. So sorry, P. Jolly Jenga, B. Strike 5 P and then B. She saved some room at the bottom of the second page to illustrate them batting a balloon back and forth, a little green felt balloon that was attached only by a string and could actually move around between the happy felt figures. Next up was a page full of large cards. Design up, then each can flip up to reveal the face, with Branch and Poppy sitting in the middle, holding a couple of realistically sized cards. He thought back to that short hangout, when he had been too nervous to ask her to stay for lunch.
That would have been included on this page, he thought regretfully.
He allowed his imagination to wander for a bit, coming up with both good and not so good scenarios as how that lunch would have turned out. Eventually, Branch focused back onto the scrapbook. The next 2 pages contained a bunch of small scenes depicting their 10th day spent together, which she had to reschedule to a Saturday. Happy Poppy with a thought bubble containing her plans with him, then a sad Poppy with that bubble broken into several pieces. Poppy sadly explaining with a little speech bubble, "I can't come visit." Then a happy Poppy with Branch giving her a small smile and a big thumbs up. The faces of her 8 best friends surrounded her with speech bubbles, while she was looking very overwhelmed. Then a Poppy speech bubble with a Branch's face on it, while her friends all exhibited question marks. The next page, Poppy was looking sad as multiple Branch faces with tiny hopeful smiles floated around her, offering the couch, giving her water, holding up a pencil bunch, a speech bubble with her friends' faces and a green check mark, reading, strike 5, the ration boxes. Then, in the final picture, Branch had his hand on Poppy's shoulder. With a pull of a tab, a smile appeared on her face. The following scene took up 2 pages as well. Poppy's character was exploding with happiness, an exaggerated smile that was literally escaping her face, with yellow rays and stars and pink hearts around her, as a much calmer Branch accepted her camp-out invite. It was immediately followed up by her plain and sitting on a log, with a dark forest background, looking kind of sad. And then, underneath, was her attacking an unsuspecting Branch with a tight hug. The giant smile and happy rays returning.
She would have been so hurt if I didn't show up.
Branch felt a fresh wave of relief for making the right decision to give the camp-out a chance. A swirling orange fire took up most of the second page. From the top, bottom, and each side were tabs to pull out little scenes from underneath the fire. The stories/jokes, all with speech bubbles and laughing faces except Branch. The snacks, floating around them with cookies, chips, and a tart circling Branch. The marshmallows and mushrooms, and the poetry. Branch's speech bubble being the biggest and having the fanciest swirly text. With each scene, the little felt Branch looked a tad happier. He could feel his cheeks growing hot at the cringy poetry memory, just as they had done on that very evening. He noticed another little pull tab under the poetry sub-scene, and his face grew even hotter as it revealed him and Poppy alone, with him looking kindly at her, and her looking at him in awe, with the little pink hearts around her. Branch knew she admired the poem, but a jolt of fear made his heart flip over uncomfortably.
Does this mean she realised it was meant specifically for her?
He took a deep breath and slowly let it out, as his second of panic subsided.
Doubtful. Poppy would have said something by now. A gentle questioning, an outright statement, a teasing hint. Some kind of obvious reaction. There's no reason to freak out. She just really liked the poem. And such a thing coming from the grey grouch probably caught her off guard. It sure caught the grey grouch off guard.
Relieved, he moved on to the next page, split in half with the next 2 days. Him looking mad as excited Poppy's speech bubbles were full of music notes, and then a sad kneeling Branch, with her kneeling sadly in front of him, extending out an arm to him. The bottom half was a bit larger, showing Poppy with a pull-tab speech bubble that said, "I'm sorry," and another that said, "Thank you for being honest." Beside that were layered papers of 4 pictures, playing strike 5, Poppy reading with Branch content beside her, him putting the blanket around her while she shivered, and lastly, a non-shivering Poppy and Branch sitting beside her. The little felt faces were extremely close in this one, and once again, Branch found himself blushing, and extremely thankful that Poppy wasn't here to witness it.
Oh, Fuzz, that girl doesn't miss a thing, does she?
Despite his words, He had a small smile as he remembered how wonderfully close her freckled sunset pink face had been to his. Next up, there felt figures with the gym equipment floating around, with Poppy holding a small dumbbell and Branch holding a larger one. A large section of the page was full of blue swirls representing water, and them swimming / her knocking him over in his floaty and laughing. Then the two of them splashing each other. The remainder of the page was them climbing the tree. Branch looked at ease while Poppy was clearly struggling. A pull tab under the tree revealed him holding her after he had caught her.
Oh, for the love of Shivan has me blushing in this one!
His grey-green cheeks had distinctive purple felt circles on them.
Branch shook his head, half amused and half embarrassed.
So far, Poppy had included every detail of their visits, good and bad, minor and major. Even the tarantula defense moves he'd showed her, despite her barely paying attention. So Branch figured she'd include something about how she observed and commented on his strength. But for some reason, there was nothing. Not even a little pop-up or pull-tab.
I suppose it wasn't big of a deal then.
Then there was the final page. Across the top was a sad Poppy, then a surprised Poppy with an open-armed Branch nearby. And then, taking up 3/4 of the page, was an elaborate pop-up of their hug. Right underneath it, on another pop-up, was the swirly text, "Our first hug ever!" He must have stared at it for a solid 10 minutes, reliving that amazing moment over and over again in his head. Her arms tightly around his shoulders, her cheek against his, her sweet scent. As he went to gently close the book, Branch noticed a pull tab on the bottom corner. Activating it revealed a pink heart that said, "I look forward to part 2. Branch lovingly ran his hand over the text, his heart feeling lighter than it had in countless years.
I look forward to it as well, Princess Poppy.
End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Bit of a longer one, but oh my god, that was gorgeous. Oh, the book. Oh, that was so sweet. The fact that she's observant and put in all that frigging effort, and also made sure it was more him based, more toned down. The girl's frigging observant, isn't she? I love that. But the fact that he notices that it's that thing, how much it means to him. They're seeing each other more and more clearly, and I love that. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.